So let's get on to the session this evening. As I said, it's managing worrying thoughts. And I'm really pleased to introduce Ali, who, as I said, is a counsellor and breast cancer now living with secondary breast cancer service group therapist. Ali, thank you so much for joining me this evening. It's brilliant to have you.
You're very welcome. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Catherine.
So I guess the first thing to sort of acknowledge, and I've done that a little bit already, is to say that at breast cancer now we have a helpline, we have lots of services that you partake in, as well as our moving forward services for people who've had a diagnosis of breast cancer, and also those who might be worried that they might have breast cancer. So that fear and that worry that people live with is a very, very real thing, particularly when you've got a cancer diagnosis, you've had that confirmed. Then it really does affect every part of your life, including your mind, which is obviously what we're going to be talking about today, your emotions and your sense of purpose. And it can have, for a lot of people, a really profound effect, and sometimes, often devastating impact on the way they think and they behave. And it's not unusual for people to say it changes their outlook on life. I can see you nodding there, and I know that you run the group, and we'll come to that a little bit later, but I think it's something that all of us at breast cancer now, whatever job we do, we get that sense of impact of a cancer diagnosis. And people talk about losing their sense of identity, of affecting their self-image, including their body image. And it's a massive shock, isn't it? It just disrupts people's sense of certainty about the future. It really does sort of toss that up in the air and make you think differently. Is that something that, as a sort of your clients and in the group, that you obviously you wholeheartedly know that is what happens to people, and that's why they come to you for some support?
Yes, absolutely, Catherine. I agree with everything that you've said. It can be a huge shock to get that diagnosis, and also just at the moment that you think something is wrong, the mind starts going, doesn't it? So all the way through, from that time of either getting an abnormal scan, checkup, or feeling a lump, or having some symptoms, that worry starts and can lead right through treatment and beyond, as we know. So yes, I totally agree. It affects all aspects of life, and is very challenging to all women, I think, who have that diagnosis.
Yeah, so I mean, we get everybody. You've just mentioned women, but we don't want to forget men. Anybody, any person that's diagnosed or think that they've got cancer, and we're specifically talking about breast cancer. But it does raise big questions, and we're going to talk broadly about people's worries tonight. So although you work on a service that is the living with secondary breast cancer, we also know that it affects people who've got a diagnosis of primary breast cancer, and we definitely speak to people on the helpline who haven't got a diagnosis but really are quite consumed by the fact that they're worried about that they might develop breast cancer, or that they've got a symptom, or they think they've got a symptom, and how. So really broad sort of sense of what that means. But I guess people sort of if they think sort of a little bit more clearly about what's going on to them, think, what matters to me now? Some things that mattered before don't matter anymore, because this is their prime concern. And actually, who am I, and where do I fit into that sort of diagnosis? And the same with people that have got that worry as well. So we know that people have health anxiety, and they are, as I say, a proportion of the people that call our helpline or maybe use our Ask Our Nurses written inquiry service as well. So we've always known that that's the way that people sort of function. But what sort of how do we start to help them deal with a diagnosis once they're diagnosed? So we are talking about people that have got breast cancer now, because that worry itself, although we're talking about treatment and different things that are going to help them get better and to treat the cancer, then we know that the worry itself is quite damaging to them from the point of view of an emotion. So where do we start with helping people sort of to manage that? Because it can also have an impact on maybe existing issues that they've already got. Maybe they've got depression, maybe they've already got a history of being an anxious person. I quite often ask people if they were anxious before their breast cancer, or they start to think about their poor lifestyle habits and maybe worry that that's something that might have sort of contributed to their breast cancer diagnosis. Is that something that comes up for you quite a lot?
Yes, Catherine, you're absolutely right. I think that health anxiety is quite predominant at the moment. I think it can be caused not only by, as you say, a diagnosis, but general anxiety as well. They say that sort of anxiety has risen since COVID. There's obviously with sort of uncertainty about the world in general. We live in a global environment now, and so things on the news can cause us anxiety. So I often say that anxiety is very badly behaved, and your anxiety or your worries may be triggered by one thing, but that can soon lead into anxiety about other things in life as well. And you find that anxiety building and spreading, the ripples spread outwards. And so that's why it's important to look at how we can add some control, how can we find things that bring meaning to life. And so we can focus on some distractions and some things that perhaps are not so helpful, and put more helpful practices and routines and habits in place just to help mitigate some of that spread.
Yeah, and I guess at this point, people start to sort of ask themselves questions, even if it's consciously or not consciously, when they've got a diagnosis, and they are worrying. It is, will the treatment work, or has the treatment worked, or what if my next scan, if somebody's got secondary breast cancer, shows that it's progressed or it's got worse, or I think virtually everybody with a diagnosis asks themselves, if they've got children, will I see the kids go to school or maybe get married? For younger women, will I be able to have children? What about things doing like normal family things, like going on holiday, and will I make it to particular milestones, to birthdays and Christmas? But so these are all very normal things, which again I assume come up in the group, in the sense of when the group are talking together. We had a couple of people sort of not necessarily specifically ask a question, but say about their worries about asking themselves and persistently worrying about, will it come back? And that was, I think it was only Ilianis, I think, is the username there. And Demelza sort of said also that she just is really consumed by intrusive thoughts of what ifs, the what ifs. Mm-hmm. So there are plenty of those, plenty of unanswered type questions, and that sort of thing can just completely take up and consume people's waking sort of thoughts, and probably affect their sleep as well. But I think we're here to say that those types of things and those types of questions is not you not being able to cope. They are very normal types of thoughts that people in this position go through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we would say, we wouldn't want to minimize that and say that they're not important. Absolutely, because as you say, Catherine, they can become very intrusive, and if they sort of get out of control, or that feeling that especially the early waking thoughts that disrupt sleep, and obviously can take attention away from things that matter and are important in people's lives. So we wouldn't want to minimize them at all, but they're not abnormal. They are a normal part of the worry. I think anxiety, also says anxiety is a normal thing. It's a normal coping mechanism. It's what keeps us safe in life. It brings concerns, and it may be some concern or anxiety that took somebody to the doctor in the first place and got the diagnosis. So it's part of our safety mechanism. It's part of what keeps us alert to danger and to threats, and things like that. So it's very important that we don't say that you should never worry or you should never be anxious, because it is a part of normal life. What we're talking about is when, as you said, one of your questions that somebody brought up is those intrusive thoughts that maybe take you down a rabbit hole, that take you to an unsafe place. And that's that anxiety and that worry working overtime, and that hypervigilance, and it's exhausting, as well as being a concern around what's happening in your mind as well.
Yeah, and for me as a nurse, I think that whole normality thing can be really helpful to know, for people to know that it's not just them that are feeling like this, or, you know, this is happening to them, but just even though it's normal, it doesn't mean to say that you don't need to do anything or you don't need any support to manage that. There is a sort of normal in feeling that, but there's also then maybe the start of intrusive, you know, intruding into that intrusive thoughts. I've got two uses of intrusive there, but you know, in taking up sort of your headspace, you know, for an awful lot of the time, and feeling at that point that maybe nothing I can do will make a difference. Is that the type of feelings that people are left with?
Yeah, definitely. It can be that almost that feeling of hopelessness that we would not want, you know, for people to have, to feel out of control, to constantly feel with that uncertainty of life, of walking that tightrope almost of life, and not being able to look ahead with any hope into the future, because that future feels so uncertain, and the threats lie in the what ifs, and the what if questions are often obviously about what might happen in the future. So we want to, you know, for people to feel safe in their present, and also not to be too worried about the future as well.
And we've got a couple of really good demonstrations of sort of the different sort of worries that people have. So Debbie's just said, I've just been diagnosed with grade 2 breast cancer. I feel a bit numb, just worried in general. And at the start of that journey, then there is so much to think about, so much to worry about, so much uncertainty, particularly if you don't have yet, Debbie, your treatment plan. You haven't got to know the people that are treating you. Then there is sort of lots to find out, lots that you don't know, lots that your healthcare professionals do know, which makes it that bit easier for them to communicate with you, but you're not really sure about that back. So Debbie, I would say to you, please do give us a ring on the helpline. You don't have to have a question, you might just want to give us a ring and say, I've just been diagnosed, can we chat? And that would be your opportunity to do that, as well as hopefully your breast care nurse and the team looking after you. But please do give us a ring. And then Michelle says, I have survivor's guilt too as well. So Michelle's obviously gone through treatment, and hopefully, Michelle, you're doing okay, but you know, that guilt is something that we hear about quite a lot, isn't it? As well as those normal worries and anxieties. So, you know, that's piling on the top, and there's only so much you can manage, isn't there, really, when you've got those sorts of things going through your mind.
Absolutely, yes. As I said earlier, you know, the anxieties and worries can start right at the beginning, and also move forward and beyond into post treatment. And sometimes that can feel a bit strange, you know, as you say, to have that survivor's guilt, to have that, you know, still feeling emotionally unstable, and not as joyous as people think that you should be feeling at the end of treatment. Sometimes I call it sometimes the emotional catch-up. You know, the physicality is over, you may be on some maintenance treatment, but the main active treatment is finished, and everybody around you is saying and thinking that you should be sort of cracking open bottles of champagne and having parties, and you've just got those mixed feelings, maybe a little bit of relief, but also that tiredness, and again, worries coming in about what the future is for you now. Now you're leaving perhaps the safety of treatment, and now it's all down to you to make a life for yourselves that feels very different to how it was at the beginning. And I think, yes, it can feel at odds with how you feel you should be feeling at the end of treatment, very much so.
Yeah, so I guess that although we've said that, you know, quite often people will think, well, nothing I can, you know, do will make a difference. When we have people who are, you know, feel hopeless or feel fearful, helpless and out of control, really that's the point that we start to help them think about what might help them and what is out there to help them, and consider really what brings them meaning and what they can bring back into their life, what they can control that can lead to that greater motivation and some control, and to try and help reduce uncertainty, which we know we can't take everything away, but sort of we want to come on now to sort of look at tips tips and tricks, or if you like, and tools to be able to do that. There's another couple of comments as well, so thank you people, everybody out there, for commenting. So Lorinda says, I'm coming to the end of my treatment for grade 3 locally advanced HER2 negative. I've had chemo, mastectomy, axillary clearance and radiotherapy to go. I'm interested in strategies to deal with anxiety around being diagnosed with stage 4, so secondary breast cancer, which obviously you come across in your work for us, Ali, in the future, and need strategies to help with that. And I think that was also, we mentioned that somebody had said, will it come back? That sort of feeling of uncertainty and worry about the future, even though you've had treatment, is something that we come across an awful lot. And Sandra says, I'm on my second diagnosis of breast cancer now, and living with regrets of only having a lumpectomy. Again, those sorts of things can come in to sort of play about the what ifs. What if I'd have had something different? Did I choose something in wrong as well? So what really, let's talk about what people can do to help themselves now, having spent that. What can people start to think about? I always call it a toolkit, or something up your sleeve, even if you don't think you need it now. What can they sort of use to take back some control, in order to help them managing their worrying thoughts? Because there are things that we can control, there are things that are out of our control. And I like the way that you explain that, so I'm hoping you're going to talk to me about that.
Okay, Catherine, yes, thank you. Yes, I suppose what we're focusing on sort of really around that toolkit, about the little tips and things that can help you, comes under a broad umbrella of what is sort of what can we control in life. Because as I mentioned earlier, a cancer diagnosis and ongoing treatment and further diagnoses that you've mentioned can lead us feeling very out of control. And the one thing we don't like as human beings is being out of control. We like to plan, we like to think our ducks are in a row, and so when we get that sort of tidal wave knocking us off course, we can feel very discombobulated. So what I explain about control is control you can put into 3 main categories. There's a third of your life which is out of anyone's control, and I'm not sure what I used before COVID, but it's a good one. So when COVID hit us, the world went out of control. Nobody knew what was happening. This disease was just rampant, this virus, and so everybody was out of control. The other things that are out of our control is things like the weather. The weather we cannot control. We like to think we do, but we can't control it. All we can do is report on what's happening out there. There's another third of our life that is in someone else's control. So back to the COVID example that I use, gradually governments, the World Health Organization, doctors, all those people started putting in controls that we had to obey, laws that we had to obey. And then the other one that I use for general life is taxes. We all have to pay taxes, and that's something that is largely out of our control. We have to be good citizens and obey the law and pay our taxes. And then there's a third of our life. Sometimes it can feel really small, and what the aim is to try and get that segment a little bit bigger, is in our control. So if we think about the cancer diagnosis, that actual diagnosis is out of anybody's control. And I would mention that for that the viewer who is saying that they have that if only. If only I'd done something different beforehand. We don't know. We don't know whether if anybody had done something different in their lives beforehand, then that would have affected that cancer diagnosis. So we can say actually largely that was out of our control. So that's that, out of our control. And then when you're going through that treatment and having tests and appointments and all those things you have to deal with, you're putting part of your life really into somebody else's control. You are trusting those doctors and nurses and radiographers to do their job and to treat your diagnosis, your cancer, and to get you through this. So we've given over part of our lives to somebody else's control. So what is that bit that we can control? And largely I break that down to 4 main segments that that you can sort of think about, well, what can you do, what good choices, what good decisions you can make that is contributing to your health at this time and your well-being, that is going to reduce down some of that worry and anxiety, and focusing on those positive things. So one good way, we'll come along to with some tips later, is reducing stress in your life. So reducing down stress, I think we could all do with a bit of that. I say that what I'm saying is not rocket science. Another thing is being more active, keeping your body and being physically more active. Eating well, we know that we're even more these days that we are what we eat, and finding the right emotional and social support, and that's where some of the groups we can talk about is as well. So those were the four main things I think that we can look at, Catherine.
Okay, and are those the sorts of things then that you find your groups discussing, between themselves as to how they manage? That sort of thing. Obviously, we've had some comments about people worrying, and I invited people to share how they manage, but it would just be interesting to know, obviously without any knowing who's there and breaking any confidentiality, but the types of topics that come up maybe that people in the Living with Secondary Breast Cancer groups talk about. Does that come up quite often in the way that people are managing and sharing those hints and tips between themselves, or what's worked for them? And the same, I guess, with our Moving Forward courses as well, because I know that that is about moving on from treatment. So anybody that's got to the end of their main hospital treatment is welcome to join a Moving Forward course and help them move on with some confidence, but also help managing that emotional and this sort of worrying time of moving forward. But yeah, I just wondered if that comes up and whether you've got any examples you might be able to sort of share of the types of things that people do within those four sections that those four areas that you've just shared.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the reducing stress, just going to the group is a good one, because it does. And I think there is something about meeting with other people that are connecting, very different in the walks of life, coming from different professions, different backgrounds, different family makeups. So we have all sorts of people living alone, people with children, people perhaps who are retired, people who are getting time off work to come to groups. So it's very, very mixed groups. I used to do a bit of the Moving Forward course as well a while ago, but now my focus is with the Living with Secondary Breast Cancer groups, the face-to-face group, and also the Younger Women's group, which is online monthly for younger women as well. But yes, I think that reduction in stress is just that ability to talk to people who know what it's like. So as soon as you start speaking, it's coming into common ground. There's that commonality of they just get it. And I think sometimes outside of perhaps immediate family and close friends, people don't always get what you're talking about, especially with those fears and worries, or they might be overly despondent and bringing you down, and again that's not always helpful. So yeah, I think the reducing stress, they talk a lot of signposting about sort of other groups that they found. There's obviously the Making Seconds Count, the Future Dreams, which is breast cancer specific. So that networking of finding out, talking about what perhaps a holistic therapist that they're doing. There's people that have reflexology, acupuncture, and again they're talking about the benefits that's bringing, perhaps going to a walking group and sort of the ability to be more active, joining a group of like-minded people. So maybe not walking quite as fast as you're recovering from surgery and things, that understanding. I must admit, there's quite a lot of cake talking about the eating. And I was just thinking, oh dear, we do share a lot of cake. But again, that's that social and the reduction of stress type thing. But again, we do have speakers come in to talk about sort of like nutritional health, and again sharing perhaps about supplements, signposting back to yourselves, Catherine, about that, or some of the charities that do look at nutrition. So there's that sharing. and also talking about that emotional support and where they're getting that from, and the emotional support for their families as well. So signposting in that sense. So definitely those are the sort of things. Quite a lot often it is about the partners are not coping well, because obviously this is a secondary diagnosis that they've now had, and that what the impact that is on the rest of the family. So they might be bringing stuff to talk about. Well, how is your husband or partner managing, or how did you tell the children, that those sorts of questions. And
so just that sharing is just so valuable, isn't it, with somebody who, like you say, gets it, so it can sort of de-stress but also give you that emotional support. And I guess for any of the groups, for as long as people are going, an awful lot of people in the secondary groups go on a continuous basis. Our moving forward groups are over a prescribed time, but I know they often set up their own WhatsApp groups to stay in touch with people and get that support as well. But just sort of featuring on the exercise and the sort of eating type things, this is not us sort of talking about what you can do to help yourself in the future from a breast cancer point of view, but just an overall well-being point of view. And we certainly absolutely allow cake, Ali, because we don't want anybody not to enjoy food and to feel guilty about having a treat every now and again, because we all deserve that. And particularly when you're sort of trying to take that control, then you do need some treats along the way to help you feel good. But I guess so that control is, those are the sorts of things that you can start to take back. As you said, when you've got a cancer diagnosis, actually what's in your control suddenly feels incredibly small compared to what everybody else's bite is of that out in somebody else's control and totally out of our control. But there are all those things that are not helpful as well. And you mentioned earlier about people saying, oh, don't feel like this, oh, don't worry about that. So there's quite a lot of bit of that, and I bet that gets talked about in the group as well. But we sort of talked before this about also the drainers and the sustainers. So the people around you, you've mentioned about family and friends, talking to them. They don't necessarily always get it, but some people are there even if they don't get it. They can still be there and still be helpful. What sort of advice have you got for people who sort of to help them think about the people that they need in their life, and actually those people that they need to let go in their life, be that temporarily, or for some people they describe that as a permanent thing. Once they've had their diagnosis, they realised who actually were the helpful people to them in their life and who weren't.
Absolutely, yes. As you say, we talk about drainers and sustainers, or drains and radiators, whatever you want to talk about. So there are, and I think really, don't you, sort of those people that you spend 5 minutes in their company, and you can just feel the energy drain from you, and you sort of are left feeling sort of washed out, or those people that just a 5 minute phone call can leave you more buoyant and more hopeful, and you feel that you've gained some energy from them. So sometimes I think you almost have to be a little bit clinical about it and think, well, where can I spend my limited time and energy at the moment? Who is going to be sort of helpful to me? Less easy sometimes with family, slightly easier perhaps with friends, just for a season, maybe just to lose them for a little while, or limit your time with them. Engage perhaps friends that are supportive and want to help you to limit them. Sometimes you can almost have gatekeepers as friends who perhaps will volunteer to do the WhatsApp. So you just share what's going on with one friend, and they will then let the others know. So you're not bombarded with 20 questions every single day by well-meaning people. That can be quite helpful. Sometimes I talk about a friendship dartboard with yourself and your immediate family as the bullseye, and then the ring spread outwards, and you put your friends and relations on sort of those ever increasing rings going out from you, and the ones that are your drainers are the ones that are on the periphery of that dartboard, and you sort of, as I say, can be quite clinical about choosing when and how you share information depending on what ring those people are, and they keep those people that sustain you close by, and those drainers go farther out on the dartboard. That can be quite helpful to think about that. But as well as, I think it is one of the losses, and I think it's a loss that I do talk about in the groups and also in my counselling, is a loss of friendships. And unfortunately sometimes people cannot handle, for whatever reason, your diagnosis, and fall away. That's about them, not about you. And you know, that may be for a season, or it may be forever. But to counterbalance that, what you often find is those friends or relations who turn up trumps, the ones that will offer you a lift in to the hospital, or will bake a cake or provide a meal at the opportune time, and you can get some nice surprises, and new friendships are formed that do sustain you, to counteract the losses.
Yeah, a lot of people describe sort of just having those friends that will listen and help. So that does help with those worries that they have that are sort of consuming them. And certainly when people are newly diagnosed, then quite often, you know, you're trying to get your own emotions and your own worries in check before dealing with others. And if suddenly people, you know, that you are telling are very, you know, emotional and worried and very upset, actually that's not something that you really should be dealing with, and you shouldn't be managing theirs. They should be supporting you, and if they're not doing that, then maybe they're one of those people that you just need to keep at arm's length. So we've talked about the normality of the impact, and we've talked about the normality of having worrying thoughts, but when they become all-consuming, and you know, we've had some examples that people have shared with us this evening, and I can imagine some of those thoughts and some of those instances, then they are consumed. What can people do? We've got a list of resources which we're going to put in the chat if they're not there already. But you know, we talked a few things through when we met the other day. But there are sort of some simple things. Obviously, there is professional support where people are really struggling and finding that absolutely every minute of every day, or virtually that, and they can't function without that worry, then it is absolutely right to be asking your breast care nurse, somebody in your treatment team, or your GP for that help, to say you can't move forward and can't function in life without that support from a healthcare professional that, you know, can help you manage. So there's all sorts of talking therapies out there, from, you know, CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, different sort of styles of counselling and those sorts of things. But from a practical point of view, what are the sorts of things that we can share with people this evening that can give them some help and some hope, just to be able to keep things, you know, contained, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say first things first is find somebody to talk to, as you say, whether that's a trusted friend or definitely a healthcare professional, because they can monitor in some way and get a sense, because they've, you know, seen lots of women, and obviously don't want to just focus on women, men also, that people with a cancer diagnosis, and so they can sense a certain tipping point about whether you do need a referral or to be signposted to somebody more professional to chat to. But yes, talking about it. They say a problem shared is a problem halved, and I think talking about it, not keeping it to yourself, because as we've said, you're not silly, you're not going mad. This is common to have, and so the professionals around you, the helpline or those people looking after you, will know what to do, because they would have heard it all before.
Yeah. And it's not unusual, as they say, you know, we have heard it before, because it's not unusual for people to say, when you ask them about who have you talked to about this, that they say either very limited or no people, because they feel, you know, maybe guilty or feel as if they should be coping well. We see so much in the media, so much on the telly about this, and actually, you know, people who are, I got through this and it was all okay and I'm doing really well now. And, you know, I'm here to tell you that an awful lot of those people will have had their downtimes and will have had these types of, you know, issues in their life as well. It's just that maybe they've had that bit of helping hand to be able to move move forward. So it's very unusual for somebody to sail through all of this without this sort of these worries as well. But sharing absolutely is a good idea. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Catherine. I would say that I would be more concerned if somebody didn't have any worries about it and was taking it all in their stride, like a walk in the park. Then I'd start to be more worried myself as a professional. So yeah, so just some of the little things. As I say, there are some links that we've put together where you can find some extra help on websites and other charities. But these are there's a few simple things that I can talk about here and now that you can take away with you. I think one of the things is we talked about was some people find that actually setting aside a time to worry can be quite helpful. We call it evacuating the mind. So setting a time that you are going, that's time limited, that you can actually say, okay, I'm going to, this thought has come into my head. I've had it 6 times today. So tomorrow afternoon, I've got a bit of free time. I'm going to put in my diary that I'm going to think about this tomorrow afternoon. And that can be, quite helpful to do that. Sometimes people find it helpful to write it down, to journal. I think that can be quite helpful in early waking thoughts. It's a time when our conscious brain, our sensible bit of the brain, has gone to sleep, and that allows our hindbrain, the unconscious part of our brain, where all our dreams and memories and anxieties are stored, to have a bit of a field day. And so quite often when you wake up, perhaps by a noise or needing to go to the toilet, or just something wakes you, that's what you've got in your mind, is that nagging, worrying thought, because it's been there and allowed to be active while you've been asleep. So sometimes, again, to writing it down, write those thoughts that are going through your head down, and close the book and put it on your bedside table and say, I'm going to worry about that in the morning, or I'm going to think about that in the morning. And quite often, if you can get back to sleep and wake up in the morning, the worry doesn't seem quite so big. I often talk about the monsters under the bed. You know, when you wake up in the night as a child, that dressing gown hanging on the door looks very much like a monster in the night. When you actually have some daylight on it, it is just that dressing gown. And that can sometimes happen to your worries. You think, oh, actually, that isn't something I should have been worrying about anyway, so why did I waste my time worrying it in the night? So writing it down can be helpful. Setting aside some worry time can be helpful as well. One of the things that I talk about as well is, perhaps because most of these what if questions are about the time in the future, what I sometimes say is changing that what if to a what is. So actually, what is true, what is factual, what is happening in the present. So you might be thinking, well, what if it comes back? That's a common one. Or what if it gets my condition gets worse, if it's a secondary diagnosis? Well, what is happening right now? And often that answer, well, is right now I haven't got cancer. Right now my maintenance treatment is working. Or right now the immunotherapy I'm on is keeping things at bay. My last scan actually was okay, things were stable. So that is actually what is happening right now. And so it can be quite helpful just to say, well, where am I in the cancer world now? What is happening to my life now? Rather than focusing what is happening, what might happen in the future. So just change that what if to a what is. What is happening right now?
Okay. And you talked a little bit before also about the sort of, is it true? Is it false? I don't know. And I guess that also leads to the what can I change, what can I not change. I think the worry tree that you showed before, so we haven't got an example to be able to show sort of as a, you know, an illustration this evening, but people can Google a worry tree, no problem. Is that the same sort of thing of thinking through that worry and sort of taking yourself down, or what can I do about it, what can't I do about it, or is it true, is it false, who can help me with this, you know, is there anywhere I can go, who can I talk to about this, and just thinking that through rather than being on that roundabout of thought, you know, that is going to stay there without getting off it and being, you know, that start to become intrusive.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the worry tree is quite a good one. As I say, there is a diagram, and the link is there. The Get Self Help link is there to download the diagram, so that's there for you. But yes, it's a section of little branches, really. So first of all, you notice the worry. So it's, what am I actually worrying about? And sometimes it's quite good to break that down and actually voice it, because sometimes you get that, what I call the washing machine, where it just all tangled, like watching clothes go around in a washing machine. All your worries are tangled up, and sometimes you know, it just feels as if it's filling your head. So actually untangling some of that washing, untangling that ball of wool, and just thinking, well, what is it that I'm actually worried about at the moment, and put it into a sentence rather than having these vague thoughts chasing around. And then ask yourself 3 sort of main questions. Is it true? Is it false? Or is it an I don't know? And if it's a false thing, you know, if it's something that really you've gone down a total rabbit hole about, and it isn't even applying to you, which you can get to if you're, you know, if those worries sort of go on unconsciously, you can get yourself into all sorts of dark thoughts that really aren't about your life at all. So is it a total false thought you've got in your head, or is it an I don't know? Is it a what if type thought? And if it is, again, an I don't know, then you can't do anything about it if you actually don't know. So do your best to lose that thought and actually turn it into a truthful thought. And that is the sort of the what is type thought. Or if it is a true thing that is a niggle, like you've got a pain in your neck or something that's been going on for several days, then ask yourself, can I do something about it? And this is this bringing that thought and worry into your control. Am I in control of this? Can I do something about it? If it genuinely is no, you still can't do anything about it, then do your best again to let that worry go, or talk to somebody about it, because it's okay to talk about a worry that might be quite vague, that you can't really, is a bit nebulous. Often those worries about the future are very vague, aren't they? Because they haven't happened yet. So you can, you know, talk to a friend, talk to Catherine on the helpline, talk to your breast cancer nurse, go to a group, you know, go online, and mention it to somebody, because it'll be a thought somebody else has had before.
Yeah, you know, definitely. And I guess what's just come into my mind is, you know, particularly, and so we are going to go back to women now. I know we've said we're not going to sort of, you know, discriminate, etc. But I think women particularly are good at keeping things going, keeping things in their head, not necessarily sharing things, because, you know, they've also got, you know, maybe a family and children, potentially for some people, home, work, all those things, and they're trying to juggle all those things, but actually stopping and thinking about the worry, and what is the worry, and who can I talk to. And like you say, you know, just sometimes, although we can't fix those things necessarily, an awful lot of people just find it really helpful to call the helpline or to speak somebody, share it, because just talking about it just helps them find a little bit of a way about what that worry is and what they might be able to do that might be helpful to stop that being that washing machine that you've just described, and things going around in their head as well. I've definitely come across people who've said, actually, you know, with the time to be able to worry about it, they visualize actually those worries in a box, and actually the box lid comes off from time to time when they control that and take that out, and they worry They then put the lid back on again and maybe push it in a cupboard or under the bed or wherever that is, and it gives them a sense of control. If the worry is still there isn't anything they can do to completely solve it, but they are actually making time to sort of do that. So the shoebox thing is something that I think about quite often. And for people that sort of really need some grounding technique when things really do feel as if they get out of control, which can obviously happen quite a lot in this sort of types of situation that people find themselves in, having treatment, diagnosis, all those sorts of instances. What sorts of tips? I liked your grounding technique, your 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I wondered if you wanted to share that this evening as well.
Yeah, this is a good one. If that anxiety is rising a specific sort of around at a specific time, quite often I suggest for people that perhaps are waiting for tests or waiting for scans, and they're sat in the waiting room or on their journey there. It is a grounding technique, and it's quite simple. It's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you don't have to do it any particular order, as we discussed, Catherine. But the idea is to sort of take a deep breath and then look for 5 things that you can see wherever you might be. It's a nice one because nobody has to know you're doing it. The idea is you do it quite slowly. And mindfully. This is one of the mindful things, a CBT type thing. So look for 5 things that you can see and describe them to yourself as you do, and say to yourself that you can see them. So acknowledge them. So I can see a computer, I can see a cup, I can see paper, that sort of thing. So that's your 5. 4 things that you can feel. So you can feel yourself sitting in the chair, you can feel your clothes, you might touch a handbag or something, or your phone. 4 things that you can feel, and again paying attention, perhaps particularly if it's your clothes that you're wearing, to how they're actually feeling on your body, what they feel like, what to your touch. 3 things that you can hear. So it might be traffic outside, it might be somebody else talking, there might be music playing. That 3 things that you can hear. 2 things that you can smell. You can sniff something discreetly, or if you can move around, there might be some flowers you can go and smell or something like that. Or if you can't actually sort of do that physically, think of 2 nice things that you do like the smell of. So it could be the smell of coffee or your favourite flower, something like that. And then 1 thing that you can taste. So again, you might have just had a drink, or it might be from brushing your teeth that morning, that sort of thing. So just 1 thing. So that's your 5 to see, 4 to feel, 3 to hear, 2 to smell, 1 to taste, and then take another big breath. And if you can focus on that, and it's purely just a distraction, it's changing channels of your mind, which is that mindfulness type thing. It will take some time as you're waiting, but also you will find, if you can do it so nice, slowly and considerately, that it will take that tension down and just relieve that anxiety for a time.
Yeah, great. I really like that idea, and hopefully that it might be useful to some of the people that are watching this evening. I guess with you talking about distraction just before we finish, then we've put some resources. You shared some of those good resources, which are all types of things, but I think most of us these days know about mindfulness, even if we've not practiced it. So plenty of apps out there to be able to do that distracting, to feature and to focus on the here and the now, the touches, the feels, the smells, and also sort of the breathing techniques as well. So there's lots out there that people can actually find for themselves, and lots within the sort of resources that you have shared as well. But whilst we're not a fan of Dr. Google in the sense of going down those rabbit holes, because that's exactly where Dr. Google can tell you, if you know that you're looking for mindfulness apps or breathing techniques. I've had things come up on I think Instagram recently about breathing, about sort of mindful breathing, the breathe in, hold for 4 seconds, hold for, and those sorts of things. Then they can all be helpful in the moment to be able to just ground and just slow yourself down and just sit, lower those shoulders, and give yourself some time to be able to just catch your breath and try and sort of take some control of those worrying thoughts. So Ali, thank you. I think we could talk an awful lot more. We have done prior to this, haven't we? But I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. I know exactly when we're on the helpline, we don't feel as if we fix things, and I realise that there's no magic wand to be able to sort people's sort of worrying thoughts about, but absolutely right to be able to think about what you can do. They may well be normal, but just because they're normal doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't and don't deserve some thoughts to be able to manage those. So whether that's self-help through the Get Self-Help website that Ali's mentioned, whether that's calling us on the helpline. So as I said, we're open tomorrow 9 till 4, Saturday 9 till 1 on the helpline 0808 800 6000. Or whether it's talking to people around you or getting some support from elsewhere, then you thoroughly deserve that. And we hope that we've just given you a little bit of an insight of having a think through of what you need to help yourselves with the types of thoughts that people have shared with us this evening. So take good care of yourselves. Thank you. Bye.